Webinar. See people joining thick and fast. Um, we will give it maybe one minute, half a minute before we get going. Quite a lot to get through today. Thanks for joining in such numbers as well. That's great to see such interest in this topic. We hope you learn about the electricity aspects of CBAM and also ways to set up your own company's systems and maybe your country's systems in order to benefit most um, from these rules. Um, I think we'll just get going. Yeah, welcome to the webinar. I'm Killian Daly, Executive Director at EnergyTag. I'm joined by Shailesh and Yevgenia from the EnergyTag side, and also Jenny Zheng, who's an independent expert who will be diving a bit deeper on the Chinese green electricity market and implications around CBAM and electricity. Next slide. Just a quick word about EnergyTag. We're a global nonprofit working on clean electricity procurement. Basically, our goal is to promote and enable the standards, markets, and policies needed to effectively drive clean power every hour, everywhere. Because often today, the carbon accounting frameworks we have, the market structures we have, the incentives we have, they're not really focused on that task. They're focused on maybe half of the job. And we need to make sure that, for example, we're delivering renewables around the clock for successful integration. Um, so some of the problems we work on are here on the left, misleading green claims, power markets that are not as effective as they could be. And what we want to do is basically, create solutions. So things like real-time energy accounting, markets that actually value storage. And we also do a lot of policy advocacy, standards advocacy, to ultimately make sure that, markets and policies are designed for our end goal of enabling clean power around the clock. And so, yeah, we're trusted by leaders across, global governments, institutions. We're also a member of the various technical committees updating global carbon accounting standards. So I think we're the only nonprofit organization across ISO, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, Science-Based Targets, and the Climate Cruise 24/7 Coalition. We're on the technical chair, looking at how do we do better in terms of electricity accounting, electricity carbon accounting in particular. Just to set the scene a bit about what we're talking about today. So, CBAM is obviously a regulation inducing carbon pricing on imports into the European Union. I'm personally based in Brussels, so I've been following this for quite a while. Obviously, Asia Pacific economies are major suppliers of CBAM goods to the European Union, steel, aluminium, etc. Um, and for some sectors, like cement and fertilizers and electricity directly itself, CBAM is already directly applying to electricity emissions. So there's already kind of millions of euros of exposure happening today. Um, and, we'll talk about that more in a minute, but there's different ways of doing the accounting of, well, what are the emissions of the electricity I'm consuming to produce the product? So this definitely creates a new attention on the need for higher levels of granularity and higher levels of precision, let's say, in clean energy procurement. So just a quick word on APAC. Coal dominates still in terms of electricity generation, followed by natural gas and hydropower. Wind and solar are growing fast, particularly in China, which is obviously the kind of the behemoth of the region in terms of economics and electricity generation. And more than other regions in the world, electricity is a heavy component of the final consumption of industry is a heavy component of the final consumption of electricity overall, and is the largest source by far of CO2 emissions as well. Renewables, as we said, are growing fast. So hydropower still remains the main source of renewable electricity in the Asia Pacific region. But wind and solar have been growing very fast, particularly in the last couple of years, and will be like globally, the dominant source of new electricity capacity over the coming years. So let's talk about CBAM in a little bit more detail. CBAM is a vast regulation. We will not be going into every area of CBAM today. We will focus on the electricity emissions part, what's happening right now, what's likely to happen in the future, and the consequences of that. Basically, the purpose of the CBAM is because Europe internally has carbon pricing on certain products like electricity and other products, and in order to prevent what we call carbon leakage, so industries moving outside of Europe because of carbon pricing and producing those products outside Europe and then bringing them back into Europe at lower prices that would disadvantage kind of internal industries, let's say the CBAM was set up in order to equalize the carbon cost with imports into the union. It applies to those products listed here on the slide already. Importers must report embedded emissions of goods, and the kind of live and active phase in CBAM has already started. For some products, three of the products listed, electricity emissions are counted already, and the EU is basically the intention is to eventually phase out what we call the free allowances on all products and including electricity, and that would likely lead to a phase in of also electricity emissions on all the products listed on the slide here. So, what's changed in 2026? We've moved from a reporting phase into a financial liability phase as of January this year. Importers must purchase and surrender CBAM certificates, and emissions are calculated by default using default values or verified actual emissions. And that's the really important part that we're going to talk about today. Electricity emissions included in some sectors, obviously direct electricity, cement, and fertilizers, as of now, with other products likely to come later. Lower emissions require verifiable electricity supply data. Okay, so like if you want to claim those actual emissions, there's a couple of things you need to do, and we're going to talk about that more. So why does it matter for Asia Pacific? Obviously, China is the largest supplier to the EU of various products across various sectors. Um, APAC economies alone account for about 800 billion of exports to the European Union. About one third of EU imports come from APAC. So a lot of these are linked to CBAM value chains. And the implication of all that is that CBAM related carbon costs and electricity sorting could affect competitiveness of APAC exports to Europe, particularly in cases where companies don't kind of manage that liability and minimize it as much as possible. So just look at the main imports by products into the European Union. This is from the Eurostat, the European Union's official statistics agency. Machinery and vehicles, energy is a very large one. Food and drink, raw materials, and other goods are also key. And of course, manufactured goods in general are a very, very important part of imports into the Union. So just to have very high level numbers, we did some kind of back of the envelope calculations to look at, well, what, is the electricity impact of CBAM once it's phased in, or should it be phased in on steel and aluminium? It's very, very significant. It's also quite significant as well, even for products like fertilizers, still in the millions of euro, even though the electricity use is relatively small. I think one thing to keep in mind as well, and the importance of these electricity rules, over time, industries will electrify more and more. And so the electricity rules and exposure and accounting will become more and more and more important. Back of the envelope today, so using the default values for the top five APAC countries exporting steel to Europe and aluminium to Europe, we see about 500 million liability on iron and steel and 1.5 billion approximately on aluminium, 1.4 billion. This is not like small fry, these are large numbers, and it's really important that companies and countries kind of get ready to, in particular, source clean electricity on these grids and compliance with CBAM rules in order to lower their liabilities. This is kind of a multi-billion euro question. So, how does CBAM actually deal with electricity? Basically, I will pass over now to get into the bit of the details to my colleague and our APAC lead, Shailesh Telang, who'll bring you through that. And I'll be back for Q&A later on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Killian. So since we now have, foundational element discuss about CBAM and why it's important for Asia Pacific, let's talk more about electricity in particular, how the electricity is being treated in CBAM calculations. So as you know, it's currently so CBAM has two options to be used for the calculations. The first one is default values, and the other one is like verified, values like verified actions taken by the companies. For example, clean electricity procurement, etc. So what really default values are? So default values, are the conservative emission factor already set by EU, which companies need to use in order to account their total impact. However, when we look into electricity procurement, especially for sectors like fertilizers and cement, CBAM now basically under the CBAM now it's allowed to have hourly matched and physically delivered clean electricity, especially, for example, power purchase agreements, sourcing clean electricity using PPAs. So that will let you use the supply specific emission factor. So that's the reason physical matching, I mean, temporal and physical matching is becoming, very, very important. What other procurement options usually, corporations use, for example, energy attribute certificates or virtual PPAs, kind of financial contracts, or annual matching, what we call is like buying clean energy attributes at the end of the year, matching retrospectively for the rest of, for the previous year or the reporting cycle and claiming renewable use. So these kind of procurement options will not be counted under CBAM. And when we, mention about this, particularly treatment of electricity, so currently CBAM covers scope 1 emissions majorly for all the sectors, but there are two sectors, fertilizers and cements, for which indirect emissions, which is basically called scope 2 emission as a result of purchased energy consumption, which covers electricity, is applicable. And that's the reason it is very, very important. Also, at the same time, when fertilizers and cements are included, that means most likely other sectors can also get included in future. But currently, fertilizer and cement is what covered. So when we look into the left-hand side, if you see the schematic over here, so just to understand like what is covered and what is accepted and what's not. So for which you can see the grid average, which is default emission factor. Basically, it's a default. You can't make any changes over there. So once you use it, it's most likely that it increased the CBAM cost because the emission factor is likely higher for most of the Asia Pacific markets. So when you calculate embedded emission of CBAM product, so you use emission factor, which is default, and then basically then you pay the adjustment based on the CBAM, emission calculation. But when you use power purchase agreements as a contractual instrument to source clean energy, so you can use supply specific emission factor. So both in the case of PPA, which has to be physically delivered, and hourly match. This is very, very important two aspects of this procurement. So physically delivered in the sense that you need to have the delivery of the electricity. Hourly match is basically most of the electricity is hourly or sub-hourly matched anyways in Asia Pacific. And then we will cover that in the next slide when Annie will talk about the settlement periods and all. But basically, this is what needed in order to make the claims of physical electricity. Plus, the direct line, which is, is a proof of line is what you need to demonstrate, like how you're procuring clean energy using the private wire, etc. And then that electricity will have to be hourly matched as well. So this is how the treatment of electricity looks like for a CBAM. The solution is very simple, actually, is just to align with the power markets. As we all know, power market is already granular. I mean, the settlements of electricity generation and consumption always happen on hourly or sub-hourly basis. So all power markets globally are settle in this zone, like 1 hour to less than 1 hour. So what is needed is aligning with the how the power market works, so that we basically mimic the generation and consumption in real time. So there is a supplier basically, and that's how supplier sells electricity on the power market, and consumer gets it, and it's always time matched. In the same fashion, clean energy procurement has to be time match plus deliverable. And this is basically way different than how the current annual matching works, where you buy certificates and match retrospectively and make claims. So that is basically not accepted under CBAM. So this is basically the solution to align with the power markets, and aligning with temporal and geographic matching as the solution to comply. So with that, I hand over to my colleague Annie to take over from here. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to spend the next few minutes looking at what is happening on the ground in APAC and the market signals, the procurement trend, and what they mean for exporter who needs to get ready for CBAM. And the core message is this, that CBAM exposure doesn't hit every market the same way. It depends on a combination of factors: how carbon intensive your grid is, whether you can prove the electricity you use is clean, things that Shailesh already mentioned. And if you look at the chart here, you'll see that we map APAC market along two axes: electricity market flexibility and access to granular data. In the context of this matrix, electricity market flexibility refers to how easily corporate can contract and physically receive clean power, things like whether open access framework access, whether you can sign physical PPA, and whether market rules allow hybrid or round-the-clock delivery structure. It's not about grid operation per se, but about procurement pathways. And a market with high flexibility lets company directly contract with generators to route power to the facilities like India, and a market with lower flexibility like China may have a strong grid infrastructure, but provincial fragmentation and restricted contracting option make it very hard to structure and verify clean electricity for CBAM purposes. So it is a very fragmented scene in APAC, whether corporates can be ready for a CBAM cost reduction. Next slide, please. And here is the balancing period across APAC electricity system. This is like one of the foundational data structure for APAC electricity system. The good news is that many markets already operate within 5, 15 minutes or 30 minutes interval. Australia, for example, has moved to 5-minute settlement, and Japan, India, and other Southeast Asian market use 15 or 30 minutes interval. Why does it matter? Because high resolution balancing period provides the data you need for matching electricity consumption and generation. That means that you already has infrastructure for verification. It's not something that is extremely difficult. It's just that accessibility was the major problem for most corporate assessing their data consumption and put it into reporting frameworks. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about what's actually happening in procurement in 2025. The picture is quite somber because the PPA volume actually dropped 36% to 6.9 gigawatts compared to last year. That is a significant slowdown and driven primarily by the decline in India and South Korea. But that said, like, deal making is more or less the same as last year. It's just the volume has decreased. And you can see that while the US, Europe has trended upward, the APAC growth has stalled. And we're seeing more bifurcation in the region between sophisticated market where corporates has more diverse and accessible procurement options, and compliance-driven market where these mechanisms are simply less accessible. So the readiness is still uneven and not really keeping pace to the CBAM timeline. We're talking about like 2026 as the reporting year. And while we have regulations and move forwarding, the infrastructure isn't, like the procurement isn't moving fast enough. Next slide. But there's a very good news on the cost side, which for corporates who wants to procure hybrid renewables, which is a combination of wind, solar, and battery storage. And the key finding is that they're getting a grid parity, like the costs are falling within or below the range of industry retail electricity prices. This is driven by the cheap renewable and storage that allows company to provide an hourly match clean electricity by the hour. And so you can actually increase your CBAM scores by increasing the hours that are renewably that are powered by renewables. Next slide. And this market has responded to this cost decrease, and we're seeing an increase of firm PPA where power can be guaranteed on every hour. And this chart is from BNEF that shows that clean energy seller in 2025, broken down by technology, solar, wind, co-located, and nuclear. And you can see that co-located projects actually becoming a much bigger part of the portfolio. But there's a caveat. Most of these volumes comes from the US and America, not so much in APAC because of what we mentioned already, that there isn't an available option for them to do hybrid PPA. So the policy implication is quite clear that you have to open up market rules that open up hybrid PPA option that will increase CBAM readiness. And country that makes it easier to contract firm clean power would give their exporter a competitive advantage. And next slide. And finally, I want to say that the cost is really coming down, as we can see in these three very big projects across UAE, Philippines, and India. The LCOE is reaching 65, 70 megawatt hour. And these are real projects at very competitive prices. Of course, they are huge and not very exceptional, but the economics are here. And what we need now is kind of the procurement framework and market rules that allowed these hybrid PPA to become a driver of demand, and so that the readiness can catch up for CBAM compliance. Now, so I would hand it to Jenny, who will talk about the context of China through CBAM lenses.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Annie. This is Jenny from the Tsinghua Tiangong LCA, and I'm gonna introduce the China's green electricity market development, especially for your maybe like want to know more about the China's direct green electricity connections and also the PPA mode. Next slide, please. Okay, first of all, before we understand what's China's market facing about the CBAM and what we're gonna do, and I want to share some like research based on investigation. So, what is the corporate demand and the drivers for purchasing renewable electricity here in China? The first demand is about green supply chain requirements, obviously, and most of the supply chain were asked by their maybe customers and by their clients to purchase the green electricities, maybe reach 100%, and to fulfill their maybe SBT or 100 demands. And the second is about the domestic and international regulatory requirements. And obviously, the CBAM is kind of like international regulatory requirements, despite maybe for steel and aluminum are not, are not asked to report the indirect emissions, but some of the Chinese companies still preparing for that. But we still have our domestic, policies for example, dual carbon control policies, emission trading system for maybe some provincial market and renewable electricity consumption requirements, and some like export market policies. And also maybe for some like maybe international companies here and multinational companies here, they're still making their own self-commitment targets to reach maybe the net zero target or 100%. So there's three major demands for the Chinese companies or purchase or maybe like international companies here to purchase green electricities. And for them, what's their maybe most care about is about the customer and policy recognition. So that's why we are talking about CBAM and CBAM's indirect, policies in here in China and how to fulfill their requirements. And the second is about, of course, everyone is caring about price. So affordability is another very, significant things here for the Chinese markets and also the companies. And there are three there are three like demands for the maybe the markets here, and it's about alignment with carbon accounting rules, greater market and resource openness, and the latest one is about granular matching of electricity consumptions, and maybe from the CBAM's requirements and from JET protocols draft. So next slide, please. And I also prepare another slides and to explain what's the the relationship between the UETS CBAM and the China's power market. And eventually that we have like the same goals and to mitigation and to address the climate change and also to support development of renewable energies. And first of all, and for the EU ETS or CBAM, because we all know that the CBAM is kind of like the mirror of the EU ETS. So the first task is about prevent carbon linkage by leveling the carbon cost of production between the EU and external producers. And so besides this, and for like the indirect emissions, and they're caring about some we call it like the carbon cost from the EU ETS and how it flow from the electricity price within the EU market. So when we are talking about the maybe the default values or actual values, we actually talk about and how to define the carbon cost and how to define the electricity price. And here in China, we have three major tasks for the China's power market policies. The first is built on maybe the unified national electricity market and to promote resource. And the second, to improve the operational efficiency of the whole power system and eventually and finally, and to enhance the power system's capacity to accommodate high shares of renewables. So, and maybe based on the linkage or like the relationship between the CBAM and the China's power markets policies, we thought that the green power direct connections and bilateral green electricity trading may provide pathways for Chinese market to comply with CBAM indirection like rules. Next slide, please. So here is just a milestone for like the China's green electricity market system. We introduced the GEC's green electricity certificate since 2017, and then we started the green electricity pilot since 2021. And from 2023, we officially, opened the GEC's systems and to receive or retrieve the full coverage of all registered electricity generated here. And in 2024, and the green electricity trading capital issues. And we are using the rules, which means settle based on the minimum of monthly generations consumptions and attracted values here. So which means that here in China, we've already received like the monthly like matching for like the green electricity. And in 2025, and we introduced like green, we call it like the green electricity direct collections here, and to encourage maybe the users and the generators to build the direct connections between them. And in 2026, this is a very very significant improve here, and the Jiangxi province has become the first in China to establish an hourly matching green electricity trading and the traceability system here. So next slide, please. And here is some like also another milestones and for green electricity systems. And actually here in China, we've all like the EU or other markets, we have like the bundle times and unbundled times here. And if you are purchasing the green electricity with bundle time, you will get the electricity as well as GECs. But if you maybe purchase the electricity by using unbundled times, you can purchase the electricity and the GECs from different generators. But both of this mode achieved a very significant and a great improvement in the last year. And as I showed you the data, And the electricity market trading value may be like 4.7% year on year increasing. And also for the green electricity trading is plus 38.3% year on year increasing. And comparing with 2023, the green electricity trading value in 2025 was nearly 33 higher than before. So please next slide. And here is like a introduction of our Jiangxi province, pilot. So first of all, my insights for that is overall, although we thought that green power trading and the direct connections could meet the requirements from CBAM, but its eligibly depends on meeting CBAM, including earning electricity match and physical deliverability. So this is kind of like two significant things that the Chinese market and our companies should, really care about. But for Jiangxi province, we've already started our electricity trading pilots, which are expected to expand further in the future. So here is like introduction of this, Jiangxi province pilots. So next slide, please. So we still have another choice for direct collections and also, supported by the NDRC and NEA and aiming to promote local renewable energy consumptions, meet corporate green electricity demand, and provide more options to reduce electricity cost. I think that the direct collection projects may also be accepted on the CBAM and with providing the such as already matching, requirements and also physical deliverability. So next slide, please. So in the end, I do some like key takeaways of my introduction. So first of all, we were ready like to get innovated, very, very innovative achievement in the recent years, no matter for like the GC trading and the green electricity tradings. And our aim is to stimulating like the demand side participation in renewables development and achieving positive market outcomes. And this is the first takeaways. And another one is about we've already achieved the already, not already the monthly matchings, and to fulfill our like domestic requirements. And although steel and aluminum exporters to the EU currently may not required to report or pay for indirect, emissions under CBAM, but this could change in the future if EU state aid are phased out, which means that if the subsidies for like electricity price is phased out, and maybe the steel and aluminum will reface the requirements from the EU under the CBAM to pay for like the indirect emissions. And so given the long lead time required to develop electricity procurement systems, we think earlier pilot exploration is advisable. And even for like other maybe like international rules or like the requirements maybe for CSRD and maybe for the ESPR and also RFN and the three pillars, maybe the already matching, the deliverability, and maybe additionally would be more and more common. And maybe we've already, received and we've already started our like, already matching partners here in Jiangxi province. And so the next step is to monitor the implementation outcomes and live verification requirements with CBAM related standards. So thank you, Annie. So Annie, you will be the next one.
Yep. Well, thank you, Jenny. Really interesting, especially the insights from China. China is one of the key partner for EU for trading. So let's move to the next section, which is basically like what are the key practical steps, kind of solutions. So I think this is something we touched base in the previous slide as well. Basically, what is needed is to move to more reality-based accounting in order to report back your CBAM compliance to the importers in EU. And more from the from the power sector perspective as well. So the first picture you see, the blurred Mona Lisa, basically that's what's the situation of the current procurement practices, clean energy procurement practices, which doesn't take care of time. So currently procurement practices are annual. So you can basically, companies can basically buy solar certificate to match with their nighttime consumption and say that they are, 100% or maybe solar powered at night, which is practically not possible without having storage in there. Location, most of the clean energy procurement are not deliverable because they just buy certificates instead of physical electricity. And also, buy from any, facilities, which is basically mostly are financially sustainable of any age, does not incentivize new renewable energy capacity addition. But whereas when companies go granular, that means they hourly matched and hourly and deliverably. Deliverable electricity is what they procure. Is basically sends a in demand signal into the market of renewable or clean electricity in time when they consume, thus incentivize demand side flexibility solutions, including storage and many likely when it sends demand signals, new capacity comes into the grid. So that's basically what's the difference between today's accounting and granular accounting. And in previous slides, which we saw, like CBAM, for few sectors now require electricity has to be time matched and deliverable. So this is basically the solution. When we look into the activities which companies can do, so far is basically first assess your exposure, for CBAM and move to more verified emission data instead of just having default values, because default values most likely increase your emissions, thus CBAM compliance cost. How to do that is like review your electricity sourcing. It's very important to prioritize time matched and deliverable clean electricity. For example, you can do power purchase agreements which are time matched and deliverable to your location. This is like very important first, and then next step is to improve on your metering systems and get access to granular data, which is like hourly generation and consumption data, which is very easy. As Annie already shows that this data is already available. It's the question of access. So when you reach out to your utilities or your suppliers, it's more likely you get access to this data already and in Asia Pacific markets. And then finally, it's very important to strengthen is monitoring and reporting verification, like MRV protocols, means processes, and like stay verification ready. So whenever your importer requests to you this data about your procurement practices, you have to have this data which is verifiable. So all these processes is required in order to prepare for CBAM. And then is you're not alone. A lot of clean energy procurement on hourly basis is already happening around the world, as you can see from this slide. Everywhere in the world, renewable energy, clean energy procurement, which is matched on hourly or sub-hourly basis, is already happening. So that demonstrates the feasibility of this kind of procurement practices. And last thing is also is not the thing it's not nobody is expecting you to be 24/7, 100% 24/7 all the time. It's actually a journey. What matters is you basically starts doing your accounting practices in a right manner as CBAM require, or many other like 24/7 initiatives also require. So the journey is very important, and it basically starts with procuring clean energy, which is time matched and deliverable, and have access to that data, and then follow the practices to move forward, like from 20% to 80% to finally 100%. So that is what the journey looks like. So with that, basically we end the presentation and now open the floor for a Q&A session. Thank you.
Great. Just a reminder as well to everyone. I see people are starting to use that now. There's a Q&A box, right? So we'll try to get to all of the questions.
Okay, let's see what we have. Okay, so the first question we have is, if I already pay carbon tax in the origin country, do I still need to pay the CBAM tax? I think I can answer that. Maybe Killian, you can jump in as well. So basically, if you pay carbon tax, which is carbon tax paid in the country of origin, so it will be adjusted in your final CBAM tax. If those are like same, then probably you don't need to pay. But otherwise, the difference is something you have to pay as a CBAM tax. Okay, let's move to the next question. Okay, I think this question is for you, Jenny. The question is, will the Chinese local government approved direct line or direct connection be recognized under CBAM?
It's very hard to say because, in my opinions, I think maybe this is like the Chinese government's policies. So maybe, but we all know that one of the targets of these policies is to help the exporters to, to face or to like to mitigation the pressures from the CBAM or other international rules. But eventually, will it accept or not is not only decided by the Chinese government, is also, like the coordination between the Chinese government and although the EU commissions. So from the technical base, because we know that we have like very, strict rules for like the direct collections. Basically, I think maybe it will fulfill the requirements from the CBAM, but I cannot give the certain answer for these questions. So the only thing I'm very sure is that if you this is like they have like the possibilities for this kind of mode. And if the consumers or maybe the users to build the direct collections projects, you should care more beyond the CBAM. You should care more about the price, the building price, and also the operations cost of all the systems. So you need like the very comprehensive assessment of this, this kind of mode here in China. So this is my answer. It's very hard to say. And so we'll see and what will happen maybe between the, the Chinese government and the EU government. And also it depends on the rules, the verification rules. If you, but now we know that the steel and aluminum are not like asked to handle your and to submit your indirect emissions data, which means we still have times to solve this kind of problems and to do the negotiations and maybe with like exporters between the exporters and the importers of these questions. So this is my answer. Thank you,
Yeah.
Shailesh.
Thank you, Jenny.
Maybe
Um,
one thing I
yeah,
would say, just to like obviously complement what Jenny mentioned, we can share that after as well. We've already shared that on our website. You know, people can go and look at the exact text of what we call the implementing acts here. So, at the end of the day, what's in the law, provided that you are ticking all the boxes, then there's very few good reasons why you shouldn't comply, right? Proving the physical delivery, having the hourly meter data on your consumption and production side to do the matching. So I think that's the best place to start, is just look in detail at the text. It's only a couple of pages regarding the PPA section.
yeah,
And direct line, of course.
yeah. Thank you, Killian. Another question maybe this is for you, Annie. The question is like, would you mind explaining why PPA volume slows down? I think this is on the slide which you shown, especially for APAC.
Yeah. So the main reason is because, like I said, South Korea and India. Um, South Korea has in 2025 experienced a huge level of like political uncertainty, which is why people has been reluctant to commit to a long-term PPA. And for India, it seems like there's no major policy change. So it's and major deal off-taker usually are large industrial user, but in the second half of the year, it's majorly like small companies has been doing PPA, which is why it on paper the volume has been down, but deal making is around the same compared to 2024. So like the key message here is just that there is still like different like very fragmented landscape here where there in some markets it's been slowing down, in some market it's not been that accessible. This is like the message in that slide.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Annie. Another interesting question we have is what are some industrial like competitiveness or advantages of combining hourly matched renewables and with electrification for lowering CBAM constraint? Probably Killian, if you can answer this, would be helpful.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good question. If you are producing, for example, a fertilizer and you electrify that process, or steel and you electrify that process, today they're very fossil reliant. Um, you can't really do that much to lower the emissions of those projects in a significant way. If you electrify that process, you can go and buy clean PPAs and really significantly lower the tax liability that you're going to have under CBAM. So I think it's a good reason to think about, you know, if we're building a project for the next 15, 20 years to produce something like steel or fertilizers, should we think about electrifying it? Because if we export a lot to Europe, we're going to have much more opportunity to pay much lower CBAM tax. So I think that's a really good question, and these rules are a strong enabler, I think, of credible clean energy procurement linked to electrification.
Yeah. Thank you, Killian. We have another question. This question is kind of, again, very interesting question as well, mostly around feasibility. Questions is that we stated that it's a reality-based approach, but for the majority of producers and in the market, especially in APAC market, it's like hourly matching and physical delivery is not realistic. That's the question. Actually, we have seen the feasibility slide before. This is an growing area. Annie already mentioned about the growing hybrid PPAs are becoming more accessible and available to markets, including in Asia Pacific. So this is already kind of happening. Plus, you can see most of the round-the-clock PPAs are being done in India and in China. And even the Indian government is coming up with FDRE or round-the-clock PPAs quite often. And another thing is most of the utilities you see, they are also offering hourly matched products, kind of green tariffs or clean electricity products are increasingly becoming available. So it's not like it's not realistic. It is already happening. It's already started. And this is already started in Asia Pacific. That's very, important to highlight. As you also mentioned about the global map where very few APAC deals, yeah, probably yes, relatively than the Western markets, but that thing is growing already. Yeah, and not just in the key markets like India and China or other like Japan and Korea is also increasingly becoming available in other Asia Pacific markets as well.
Maybe if I could
Okay.
jump in,
Yeah.
yeah, just to make the point, I think the vast majority of the PPAs in the world today are already physically delivered. And power markets settle at 60 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes. So this has to be done anyway for the physical delivery and settlement. I guess what we're talking about with the hybrid PPAs is when you bring solar and wind together with batteries, you're going to get much higher levels of hourly matching, and that would lead you to have a lower overall carbon footprint of your electricity. But if you just have a solar PPA right now, you're already getting some maybe 20, 30% hourly matching with that, right? And if it's a physical PPA, the power is being settled that way. So this is not like random and novel and new and like not possible in APAC markets. It's actually the basis of how things work anyway on electricity settlement. I think that's a very important point. We're not kind of reinventing a new paradigm here.
Yeah, that's very important to highlight. It's just we need to align with the power market, how it works, which is already granular. Another question maybe is for you, Killian, is what do you think of EU not requesting traceability backed by energy attribute certificates for indirect emissions? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any
No,
views?
I think it's unfortunate. I think that, it would have been much better if the CBAM rules had been more specific on the need for energy attribute certificates, because as was mentioned in the question, you know, there could be cases where if they're not included or sold to someone else, we could be having double counting, which is not good. I think that actually in practice, what's going to happen is, people will still use energy attribute certificates bundled into their PPAs as they are useful for traceability. Obviously, over time, they're going to have to evolve to be hourly to enable that hourly verification in a more easy fashion. I also think there's a word of caution on this, by the way. I think the European Commission has been like very clear about its deep concerns with the robustness or credibility of just using today's energy attribute certificates as we have them, to do something as important as verifying a carbon tax. And I think, yeah, it's also maybe a signal that we need to make sure that these systems continue to evolve over time and don't, let's say, find themselves out of more regulations in the future, because it's not the first time that this has happened in Europe. And I guess if the systems don't evolve, it won't be the last either.
Yeah. Thanks, Killian. Another question is really interesting on the market instrument. Question is from India. The question is, I represent Indian Energy Exchange. We have a market called Green Day Ahead Market, wherein only renewable sellers are allowed, and 15 minutes matching is done. So will it be accepted under CBAM guideline? The reason is because this is collective market and there is no one-to-one matching, but all the sellers are renewables. I think this is interesting question because we only talked about PPAs and direct line over there, but this is Green Day Ahead markets. 15 minutes matching is already happening, and I assume there will be underlining contract, which is power purchase agreements in order to offtake the power. So in that situation, it should be accepted because this is a physical delivery within India. In India is considered as a single market anyways because of same bidding zone. And there is a power purchase agreement and hourly matching done at 15 minutes interval. But we need to see like what are the contractual arrangement over there as we evolve and acceptance of this instrument under the CBAM. But it looks like it is accepted. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, so how will CBAM treat biofuel like wood pellets in the generation of electricity or mixed with coal? Who wants to take this question? Okay.
Well, the electricity accounting rules say that you can claim actual emissions, based on, it doesn't have to be zero emissions. I don't know why you would use a coal contract. That would not be a good idea for many reasons. In terms of biomass, I think we're going to have to look into that and get back. I'm not sure what the emissions factor that the commission is going to have, allocated to biomass. Obviously, those vary a lot in general, depending on the source of bioenergy. So yeah, we'll get back on that one. Maybe I don't have the exact answer on the emissions factors on that.
Okay. We have a follow-up question on on the feasibility, I guess. Can you elaborate on utility green tariff program being eligible for CBAM? I don't think currently it's communicated or demonstrated that utility green tariffs will be counted for CBAM. Only hourly match PPAs and PPAs with direct lines are counted, but probably it will be considered in future, but we don't know that. Okay, let's move to the next question. The question is, in Vietnam, we have to comply 100% match every 30 minutes. For virtual direct PPAs by national grid, where one solar farm share for various smaller size factories instead of one big client taking a whole farm. So this is really a big trouble. So what do you think about this case? Okay, if I understood it right, it's a virtual DPPA, and there are multiple multiple farms where solar farms shared for multiple factories. So multiple factories are procuring clean energy. So how it is applicable to CBAM, if I clarify. So Killian, jump in, but what I think is DPPA are based on 30 minutes full market price, FMP, and it is matched on 30 minutes interval. And it is also called as direct PPA. But the physical delivery of power is something we need to see in here. But I think supplying that power to multiple factories, I don't see that's a problem. Uh, Provided there is a PPA signed between solar generator and those factories. Yeah.
Yeah, no, agree. And I think one thing we've been thinking about as well is maybe doing more of a deep dive session, potentially with some legal experts in future to take some of these questions on board. Um, because every market has its own different structure. I know that Vietnam has the 30-minute settlement, which obviously bodes well, let's say, for the time matching part. Proving that physical delivery is something I guess that it'll depend on the contractual mechanisms in Vietnam. But I think all of that again underlines the importance of starting to think about this now, and integrating this into your thinking now. Given the length of PPAs, etc., it's important that this is not thought about in 5 years, that it starts to be thought about now.
Yeah. Thank you. Another question I think is more from the technical side. I mean, from the generation side, the question is for a solar PV plant, how can hourly match be ensured, considering like weather conditions? Because one day it's like sunny and the other day it's not. Giving an example of like 1 megawatt power plant. So how it can be hourly matched? I think that's where the storage plays important role, where you can basically store energy and use it at other. It's kind of shifting generation to other time. But however, even if without storage, the generation, whenever is the generation, if you have consumption, it is basically time matched automatically, and that is something need to be demonstrated. Looking into generation curve and consumption curve. But storage can play a very important role in forming that contract, that generation, I mean, that supply. And just to add in, most of the solar, especially rooftop or on-site solar, are already time matched because when you generate, you consume. So that's how usually the on-site solar generation is. Okay. Another question is it possible for the default value of CBAM to adopt electricity emission factor with smaller temporal and spatial granularity? Okay. I think currently the emission factor do not account, you know, granularity. I mean, time-based emission factors are not in there. Uh, But in future, if those get introduced under the default values, those has to be used. Okay, so we kind of almost reached to the end, and I know there are so many questions already here, and we apologize for that. Like we can't answer all the questions in the limited time we have. So we will take these questions, and reach back to you later separately, or you can also get back to us on our emails, and we will try to answer those questions bilaterally. So with that, thank you very much for your time to join this webinar. I also thank all the speakers for the very incredible information shared today in this session, and have a great day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.